Evening. We can't escape the nanny state, even at Google, so thank you very much for being welcomed to Google Air. We've got a great lineup for you today, actually. Fantastic lineup of speakers. I'm going to introduce each of them one by one. My name's Nigel Gwilliam. I'm consultant of emerging tech and media at the IPA. What I'm going to do first of all is cover off the subject that actually no one wanted to talk about, which is completely understandable. I quite like a bit of dystopia, so I'm going to do a few opening remarks, a few thoughts, a few big picture stuff, and then I'll introduce each of the speakers. Great lineup, and then we're going to have a Q&A at the end. Very important. I'll give you some specific details about the Q&A. Very important because we are filming today, just to make sure we get that all recorded properly. But we'll crack on and cover that later on. There we go. So my little kind of early thoughts about this were, beyond tech utopia. South by Southwest is all about utopian thinking, about vision, about what's coming up, what's changing in the world of technology, and how that's really a positive perspective on life as a whole. And there was a lot of this about, okay? So I'm not going to dwell on these things, but we had 3D printing talked about last year, and this year we had Oreo doing 3D printed cookies. A couple of years ago we had cyborg monkeys moving robot arms with their brainwaves. This year we had Subway doing a competition to compete for brainwave competitions, to move a virtual slice of pizza to one side of the screen or other. So, brands are active in technology. We have the Oculus Rift, which obviously at South by, the big thing was that you could do a fly-around visit of the Game of Thrones landscape, which is complete, I don't understand at all, but apparently that's really amazing for the Game of Thrones fans out there. $2 billion sale to Facebook. So all of these things are going on, and these are the common kinds of themes that take place at South by Southwest. But for the first year, something really strange happened. There was a really strong counter thread operating through the kind of the 5 days of talks. And I want you to take a look at the next 3 slides, which I'm going to do in quick succession, and see if you can pick out the common theme between them, between all 3. All right, so that's number 1. Do we all recognise who that is? Yes, no? Julian Assange. That's Edward Snowden. And that's Glenn Greenwald. So all key speakers at the South by Southwest this year. Did you spot what was common between all 3 of them? Privacy. Subject matter privacy, absolutely right, but a little more logistical than that. None of them were there. So all 3 of these key speakers, for the first time, they weren't actually present at South by Southwest. All 3 of them were there remotely, basically because they were either unable, in the case of Julian Assange, who was only just down the road from the IPA in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, Snowden, who was there virtually via Russia because he's threatened with arrest, and Glenn Greenwald in Brazil. He's uncomfortable with traveling to the US now as well. So a really big issue, right? And what were they all talking about? They were talking about surveillance. Okay, not a typical subject, I imagine, for a 44 Club event around marketing and technology. And I have to say I was a bit suspicious of Snowden and the whistleblower. He's in Russia, that well-known bastion of human rights kind of support. But actually, there was a Q&A in his session, and he was by far and away the most eloquent of those 3 speakers around the surveillance issue. And before they went to an audience Q&A, the guy who was interviewing him, who was in the room, said, we've actually got the first question. We're going to give it to Tim Berners-Lee, who's actually talking in another auditorium. But because he invented the web 25 years ago, we'll give him the honor of the first question. And so he read out the question, but he preceded it with the statement from Tim Berners-Lee, right? Guy who's internet royalty, right? Which said, look, I just want to thank you, Edward Snowden, for bringing this to our attention. And he went on to ask Snowden about how he would introduce governance of surveillance, national kind of spy surveillance. So this is a really big subject, and it has a massive impact on all of us as individuals and consumers, and on our business professional lives. Okay, what is it about? These are the only notes I'm going to read. Okay, it's slightly tinfoil hat type stuff. Okay. Prism, this is probably vaguely on your radar. Hands up if you're really into this whole issue. Is anyone really into this? There's a handful of people know about it. So I'm going to try and keep it at a fairly kind of introductory, kind of mass market level, right? So PRISM, okay, I'm going to read this to you, is a clandestine mass electronic surveillance data mining program launched in 2007 by the National Security Agency with participation from an unknown date by the British equivalent agency GCHQ, all right? The PRISM program collects stored internet communications based on demands made to internet companies such as Google, our host today, who were forced to hand over this information under the FISA Amendments Act of 2008. Okay, so what happened was the national surveillance people were going to Google, going to Yahoo and saying, a secret court says you need to give us this information, and they would get the information. That wasn't enough for them. Okay, that's mass surveillance, that affects all of us, but that wasn't enough. The spy infrastructure in the US and with junior partners in the UK went on, and this is where it gets really tinfoil hat-like, to develop a further program of mass surveillance. And this is something with a wonderful name, Muscular, okay? And it has sister programs called Incensor and Turmoil. So it sounds like a sex toy range or some kind of homoerotic kind of vignette series. But so I don't know what the spies are up to. They're getting a bit carried away with themselves. But just to carry it on, describe it. Muscular, located in the United Kingdom, is the name of a surveillance program jointly operated by by GCHQ and the NSA in the States. Okay, what they discovered was that the public internet is largely encrypted, but when Google and Yahoo exchange data within their own cloud between their different data centers, it's just in plain text, okay? And they basically got a British telecoms company to stick a big fat suction pipe into the fiber optics between the Google data centers, and they sucked out everything unencrypted and stored it indefinitely in Fort Meade in the United States. So basically, if you used Google, Yahoo, Facebook, and others in the first half of last year, your unencrypted information will be collected and held en masse in the United States, okay, in Maryland. And Google were livid about this, okay? You can see the little smiley face. The spies were basically laughing at the encryption people saying, inside the Google front end, everything's free and easy to read. We can do what we like, okay? So there is a mass movement now to try and address this. All right, Snowden was the most eloquent speaker, as I mentioned, and what he was really doing was a call to arms. He basically said, look, we can have governance solutions, but basically to keep the national government, the national spy agencies honest, we need you, the tech community, to develop user-friendly solutions to help protect people's privacy, right? To keep information away from the prying eyes of mass surveillance, okay? That has a massive impact potentially on our industry, because what are we obsessed with in digital marketing and communications? Being data rich, okay? I won't dwell on this. This is basically for the kind of the geekier amongst you. Tor, or the onion router, is a perceived solution to the issue of mass surveillance. The long and the short of it is it's very difficult to use, but it makes it very difficult for anyone to track you. So the key question is, will the tech community be able to develop something similar to this that's actually very user-friendly? Okay. Now, on the Monday of South by Southwest, Eric Schmidt, okay, obviously from Google, so I have to, choose my words carefully here. But he was up on stage talking about what a tremendous issue this is for Google. He was visiting the White House with Mark Zuckerberg, soon after this, basically to say, look, the spying infrastructure is over the top. We need to kind of do something about it. And Google, we're going to basically protect you, the consumer, from your own government. Okay. Which kind of begs the question, right? Not just who watches the Watchmen, right? But who watches the Watchmen who watch the Watchmen? Because a few years ago, right, Eric Schmidt had a slightly different perspective on the kind of the overall nature of data and privacy and information, right? And this kind of concept is not unusual in Silicon Valley, amongst the entrepreneurial class of the West Coast of Silicon Valley. And this is not a kind of a weird kind of parochial little issue. This goes to the heart of everything to do with digital marketing communications. This chap is the Pernod Ricard CMO. He's also the current president of the World Federation of Advertising. So he's, arguably the most important client on the planet. And he was saying, this was a piece from Marketing magazine about 3 or 4 weeks back, brands must guard against WikiLeaks moment in digital, okay? Bit ambivalent about that statement because it suggests he's got something to hide, that he's worried about leaking, which probably isn't exactly what he meant. I think he's probably getting to grips with the idea of, in a digital world, you have to be transparent. You have to walk the walk as well as talk the talk, all right? So how is this going to impact our industry? Bottom line, will we be tarred with the same brush of invasiveness or look benign by comparison, right? People are pretty kind of uncomplicated creatures most of the time on many levels. I very much doubt that they will make a dramatic differentiation between the advertising and kind of commercial industry, or the advertising commercial sector and national government. Much more likely, they'll just say lots of people are out to steal my data, to abuse my privacy, okay? This is a guy called Ben Page, absolutely fantastic public speaker. He's the CEO of Ipsos Mori. We had him at an IPA event talking a couple of weeks back, and he put up a couple of really important stats, right? Nearly 2/3 of people want less data recorded about them. Okay, absolutely fundamental in terms of when you ask people, most say, yeah, too much is collected about me. And yet, 77%, nearly over 3/4, haven't changed their default privacy settings. So this presents a real challenge, a real kind of thought-provoking challenge for agencies and for the brands that they work on. You know, where within that kind of strange dissonance is the real human perspective? This is just something that Alan Rushbridge has said, alluding to the fact that we're just all going to get tarred with this same kind of increased interest in privacy. Snowden revelations have put a microscope on the issues for marketeers, okay? So Martin Sorrell at Adweek was basically saying the same thing. People are underestimating the impact of the Snowden whistleblowing on business as well as on politics, okay? And the second key point is how much will this data-rich environment change, right? There's a real tension, real competing forces at work. It used to be very one-directional, okay? The general trend was there is going to be more devices, more connected, more of the time with faster bandwidth, fatter bandwidth. The Internet of Things is coming. Basically, you know, everything is just going to go berserk in terms of each of us creating data exhaust. And, you know, there's basically, and I've stolen this slide from Lawrence, so I won't, he'll go on to explain this particular idiot. But who isn't Robert Scoble, I hasten to add, it's just a backdrop. But the general view was the whole concept of privacy was probably a bit of a dated thing. It was probably just a blip in human society. And actually, there'll be this trade-off between new technology in return for giving up our privacy. Mark Zuckerberg famously or infamously had Zuckerberg's law of sharing, which is every year we become comfortable sharing twice as much as the previous year. Okay, and his entire business, Facebook, other than a few data centers, right, and a couple of offices, almost their entire asset base is their users' data. That's almost the only thing that they've got. So his whole business perspective is about maximizing revenue from that kind of asset base. But something weird happened not that long ago, okay? Facebook bought WhatsApp for something beyond pocket change. Right? Was it $19 billion? Okay, $19 billion, right? Do you guys use, hands up who uses WhatsApp? How much data have you given WhatsApp? How much data do you think WhatsApp collects from you? Bugger all. Okay? They collect next to nothing. The guy who founded it grew up in Soviet Ukraine. He's paranoid about the whole idea of state surveillance and based on the KGB, understandably. But his entire premise, and this is really important from the perspective of our industry, he also despises advertising. And he says, basically, if you don't need a business model that's predicated on advertising, you don't actually need to collect a vast amount of data, because the main reason you collect data is to segment audiences to then sell to people. So if you don't do that, you just don't need to collect the data. All that we focus on is about delivering a great service and knowing as little about you as possible. So Facebook, right, Zuckerberg's law of sharing, has just, as far as I can work out, taken out a $19 billion hedge. He's basically said if this big counter tension, this big counter force against this kind of increased sharing, reduction in privacy doesn't play out, if the kinds of things that are emerging with the Snowden affair, most obviously, make people more concerned. He wants a hedge. Okay, that's the way I see it in any respect. And this whole idea about privacy and about permanency and data sharing and digital permanence, right? We all know, do you know who this guy is? This is Evan Spiegel. He's co-founder of Snapchat. He's 23 years old, lives with his dad. And his whole pitch is deleting should be the default. Hands up who's on Snapchat. Right, so you all know, I know you know the fact that the pitch is deleting should be default, but actually it doesn't completely get rid of it, right? So there's an interesting marketing perspective to this. Did you all know that? You know the things that you put on there are squirreled away somewhere on the device? Yeah. So the important thing from this is not just the nature of that. It's to say, look, there is a push and pull. There are people pitching for this. It changes behavior, okay? You quickly end up, if you think things aren't permanent, that is a man, and it's not me. It's not me. The Director General of the IPA, when I showed him this presentation, asked if that was me. He said, my shoulders are far broader than that. But I just wanted to end on that slightly lighter note to quite a dystopian subject. It's going to affect, this whole area is going to be hugely impactful for us.